I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. Later in the program, we're going to talk some transportation funding with a Senate Majority Leader. But first, you know her, you love her. She's got the best hair in the business. Amy Oliver, thanks for being here.
Amy Cooke.
Amy Cooke. Oh, yeah, your husband keeps reminding me. I still remember when you had a whole different name.
Well, yeah. So there are several names you can choose from.
Because you have a Rolodex of names.
Yeah, really makes it keeps the debt collectors really on their
toes.
Amazing
when you have a different credit card for each one. It's good. Let me ask you about your role in this Trump transition team. I've never been this close to power. I mean, I've worked with you for years.
Stand back.
I mean, I've never known somebody who had a direct line of communication to the big man.
Well, you still don't.
Right, you were asked to be on the transition team for the EPA.
Right.
And that was fascinating for a bunch of reasons. Mostly that when it was happening, it seemed almost cloak and dagger-ish. And it was just security stuff. It seemed that people were so freaking out, you couldn't walk into the EPA building without an escort. Is that right?
Well,
tell me the story.
Okay, so Myron Ebell, who was our transition team leader, is and he runs an Energy and Environmental Policy Center at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Let's just say the environmental left doesn't really like him. He is not well received by that crowd, and if you
but we are, so that's nice.
Right, so they really like us. But if the recent history of the EPA is that they have had some rather intimate and less than transparent relationships. Maybe intimate's the wrong word, but let's say they have been very close with some of these environmental groups. That is who has essentially been promoting policy in the EPA. So these people are not in charge anymore, and now you have Myron Ebell and his merry band of transition team members, and we weren't the favorites, that's for sure. So they protested. I think they protested out in front of the White House. They protested in front of the EPA, and these are people like Bill McKibben and 350.org and people like that, wildly unhappy with the outcome of this election. And the funny thing was, so on the day that I was named to the transition team, I was the second person named to the transition team. The morning of my announcement, and I didn't even know I was going to be announced. It was December 1st. That morning, League of Conservation Voters sent this, pleading open letter to the Trump children saying, please tell your father about climate change, get him on board with climate change and how it's a catastrophe, and just the typical stuff of we're all going to die if we don't get onto climate change, if he doesn't take it seriously. Well, so Bloomberg News writes, and it's kind of funny, they write, and how does the Trump administration respond? They name Amy Oliver Cooke to the transition team, a self-described mother in love with fracking. So we spent 6 weeks essentially laying the action plan for the agency. Now it's up to the president and the new administrator as to whether or not they actually want to use or follow that action plan. But we spent about 6 weeks, I think, 8 weeks working on the action plan.
And what you did on the EPA, of course, transition teams do here, there, in every department, every agency, because it is a big transition to make that happen. I've always been impressed by what seems like the ease of transition of power. I mean, it's an amazing thing in this country. We take it for granted, and it's a great thing. One of the things that you guys suggested was apparently to gag and take away the voices of every man, woman, and child, to stomp on their First Amendment rights.
Absolutely.
What I'm talking about is that when you guys came in, or when Trump came in, he put a freeze, said, would you guys, we're not going to put out statements through Twitter right now. Tell me what your concerns were when you were looking at it as a transition team.
Let me just say what that really was.
Yeah.
So it was the normal transition of power from one administration to the next. That's it. All of the communications from the EPA prior to the Trump administration went through the Office of Public Affairs, through 4 political appointees that went through the Office of Public Affairs. They approved all content. They resigned at noon on the 20th of January. They resigned, so there was nobody there except for the leftover staff, the holdover staff. So there's nobody directing communication. So the beachhead team comes in and says, we are now assuming control, or we are assuming the all of the content, anything that goes out, we are now the people you go through. So that means they had to take control of 38 Twitter profiles, 34 Facebook pages, 55 widgets, Pinterest, Flickr accounts, Storify, Medium, as well as blogs, discussion threads. This is the era of social media saturation. So you had a team, the skeleton or the beachhead team that actually had to come in and assume control of all of those right away. I mean, of course they did, because that's what you do from one administration to the next. What was funny was how some staffers and some of their allies in the media, it was like their hair was on fire.
So just to wrap this up, so basically, team comes in and says, all right, during this transition, we're putting a freeze on all those accounts.
They don't. That isn't what they say. No. What it is all the content now goes through beachhead team, because it all went through the Office of Public Affairs before. Right. Now it's going through the beachhead team, which means all of this stuff.
Now, mind you, the press goes apoplectic every day now, so I'm used to it. But for a couple days, it was, oh my God, what if we have a question about climate science and we want to talk to somebody at the EPA? Oh my God, what if we go on the website and the information isn't there? Oh my God, they're stifling people's speech and I was like, wait a second, they're just doing the transition.
Right.
It was not a story.
No, it was the biggest non-story. The story was that, here's what the press missed, that this is the era of social media. The EPA has a social media and online arsenal. All the content previously went through a political appointee. The EPA also, about a year ago, the Government Accountability Office ruled that they had violated federal law with how they use their social media. And they have a history of working with groups that are openly hostile to the new administration. Don't you think it's reasonable that the new team coming in would say, you know what, all content that was going through these guys before, they're now goes through us. And so they assumed control of all of those social media accounts, every one of them, as they should, because that was
just go through their media office.
Right, it's exactly right. And there was a spokesperson and everything. It was the biggest non-story.
But it spoke to me a lot.
But they missed the other story.
It spoke to me a lot about how, as this transition's happening, and big things are happening, big changes are happening, but the panic over stuff that is not a story. You know, nobody's being squelched. They're just putting together the media team. It was hysterical to watch, and I just felt so good knowing that you were part of it.
Well, what was funny is actually the New York Times got it right. They did. Coral Davenport of the New York Times said this is essentially what happens. And then
and what's going on at the EPA happens every time a president changes.
Said this is the normal transfer of power. U.S. News and World Report got it right as well, and in fact accused the media of mischaracterizing the story. It reminded me a little bit of the Martin Luther King bust, where, oh my God, they removed it and it became a story. Right. And this time it was, oh my God, they're squashing free speech rights of the EPA staffers, and we're not going to get information. Nothing could have been further from the truth.
I'm trying to think of, I don't know why I just got this thought of Gone with the Wind, you know, the little old ladies who would fan themselves and always feign, oh my goodness, oh my, this is, never before has this happened. All right, let me ask you a little bit about the inaugural, because I just found this fun. You were invited to the inaugural because, you know, you are a center of power now.
Yeah, I am it.
Yeah, you are it. Is he a good dancer? You danced with him. I saw the photographs.
Yeah, because
Melania didn't mind.
I was doing my best Melania impersonation, where she is 5'10" and I'm 5'4".
You are the Independence Institute, Melania.
Although I don't speak 5 languages. In fact, I stumble over English sometimes.
It was just an anecdote you told me on the way to the swearing in.
Actually,
it spoke to me of how harsh the critics of Trump are. And by the way, I'm not, I've been a Trump critic as well. But this is crazy. What happened?
So this was actually right after the swearing in, and I needed to find some facilities. So I left my husband and said, went over to Union Station. So if anybody's familiar with D.C., we were at Union. I went over to Union Station, and I walked past the barricades that were set up for the inauguration for the swearing in. And when I walked in, all of you ever look around and go, I think I may have made the wrong turn.
I think I made a left when I should have made a right.
Yeah, and I was in the middle of a bunch of protesters. Well, it was cold. It was really, really cold that day. And so I had bought a hat. And my hat, it was $10 on the street and had Trump across it. So I went in, and as I'm trying to make my way to the restrooms, they're screaming in my face, and all I could think of it were my mom.
What are they screaming in your face?
Well, I can't say it on television.
They were dropping F-bombs left and right.
And they were saying that we should do that to the president, and all I could think of was my mom kept popping up in my mind. If all you can think of is a 4-letter word, you need a thesaurus. So we should get you a thesaurus. So they're screaming at me, and I'm by myself. So it's not like there are a lot of them. So I go into the restroom, and they're scratching on the restroom while I'm in it.
On the door.
Yeah,
right
on the door. On the door. They're scratching, and so anyway, I got out, and I texted my husband, and I texted John, and I said, I don't really feel safe here. I'll meet you across the street. So I went back over to where the National Guard was and stood with them. It was, it's not like I sat there and feared for my life, but tensions are really, really high. And it was evident.
It reminds me of people I know who refused to put out a Trump sign, but they wanted to, but they didn't want their home vandalized. And it was this thing. So you made the sin of expressing yourself with a Trump hat.
With a hat, because I was cold.
Right.
And it was not comfortable. And they wanted it to be uncomfortable. It was when we were going to one of the inaugural balls, they want to run up in your face and scream at you, as if that wins me over to their side, as if that somehow I want to engage with somebody who is screaming at me that I should do something to the president.
I've always wondered, and let's leave it at this, but I've always wondered if they understand that behavior is what got him to win.
Right.
That's why he won. And I don't know if they've learned that lesson.
No, and I would agree with you. That is exactly why he won. It's that kind of bad, awful, just that indignant, in your face, as if I was doing something wrong by wearing a hat. Or also, we were warned not to put pictures on social media of us, certainly not anything to do with transition team, because it's a security precaution. So I didn't put pictures of me up on social media, especially at the inauguration. I only did one, and it was at the concert.
Incredible. Amy, thank you. Get back to work. Amy Oliver from the Independence Institute. Stay tuned.